Hello, my name is Stephen Redman and welcome to another episode of Pastor's Library. This is the channel where we discuss everything to do with theology books, books that might be on a reading list for a seminary course, for a degree course, bachelor's or master's in biblical theology or biblical studies. Wherever you see these books or whatever attracts you to a book title, then we are here to try and help you wind your way through those difficult lists and discover which books may help or of interest to you. So today we're going to look at a reasonably modern series of books which have their theme in a number. And if you like what we have to say today, please give us a thumbs up on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe and click on the bell because that really helps us get the message out there, and we're very grateful to you. Remember to leave a comment below as well if you have something to say or a further question. It really helps me and it often guides me in producing future videos. So I am a huge fan of Gordon Fee and Mark Strauss's How to Choose a Translation for All It's Worth. This is without doubt an outstanding book and will guide you through the issues about translating the Bible from Hebrew and Greek and Aramaic into English and other languages for that matter. And it will make recommendations to you on why you might want to read particular translations. And this is an outstanding book. It's a 2007 book. But I've always got my eyes open for other books on this subject because people ask. They say, what about this new translation? Should I endorse this translation or whatever? And having some sort of background to the choice of translation is helpful. So whereas this book is still the one to go for, I recently saw that Mark Strauss had a new book out. Yes, this is the same guy who wrote with Fee, on 40 questions about Bible translations. Now, that is the sort of title that intrigues me. And I'm going to also refer to a couple of others in this series, which is getting to be quite a size now, 40 questions about ... So, Mark Strauss has written well and he's written a lot. He's got commentaries out there. He's got lots of books in the theology circle. He's definitely always well worth reading. And what he's done with this, he has given us 40 questions and then he answers them. So, for example, why do we need a Bible translation? What should the goals be of Bible translation? And what are the strengths of various types of Bible translation? What are the challenges of translating words or collocations or idioms or poetry and figures of speech? And each of these is a chapter heading. I have to say to you, this is both refreshing and helpful. And I really, really want to recommend this to you because it will answer lots of your questions. If, for example, you're a huge fan of the King James Version, it will help you understand why some people aren't. And it will still help you understand why you are. And these sort of questions and answers are great ways of revealing understanding. And he has asked the questions that I believe that people are asking about this type of subject. And the answers he gives are comprehensive and good. Every chapter has a section on reflective questions, usually 4 or 5, that allow you to maybe use this as a workbook for maybe a small group or a book group. So this is very worthwhile indeed. Now, what I have to say to you is I have found this to tick a few boxes for me in that he isn't really coming down against translations and coming up with great idealized versions. But what he's really doing is he's just letting you see what decisions and choices have been made by translators and what impact that will have on you if you read them, and why you might want to or you might not want to engage with them. So I really think Mark Strauss has done well with this book. Now, there are a whole series of these, as I've mentioned. I mean, there are, for example, 40 questions about elders and deacons, about biblical theology, interpreting the Bible, prayer, women in ministry, Calvinism, Arminianism, the Apostle Paul, salvation. There are so many of these series, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. I thought to myself, is this going to end up as just another shelf full in my library? But I don't think it will do. But I have bought 3, including this one, to consult and to try and get a view on the series. So, Mark Strauss, I would say definitely this is one. And that's one that you should engage with. I saw 2 others that invited me to buy them. One is by Matthew Bennett, and it's 40 questions about Islam. Now, there are a lot of Christians who get confused about Islam. Our society is confused. Our society tells us that Islam is another religion of the book, that we have the same roots, Christianity and Islam and Judaism. They will tell you that terrorism is a tiny, tiny minority view, and all of these different aspects. But this is written by a thoughtful student of literature, and he gives us 40 good questions and he answers them. For example, he discusses the relevance of the Quran to Muslims and the Sunnah, and actually compares their impact. And I suppose if you want a quick answer to that, the Sunnah has a greater impact than the Quran has. And he talks about Sharia law. He talks about the 5 pillars of Islam and the 6 articles of faith for Islam. He talks about creation, he talks about sin, he talks about salvation. Some of these things, there are similar roots to Christian thinking. But what is very clear if you go through this book is that there is actually deep blue water between Christianity and Islam. And to say that we are all students of the book, it's not really, it's disingenuous, that's what it is. The truth is that Muslims and Christians don't worship the same God, because Jesus is the author of salvation. All salvation comes from Jesus. Jesus, who is himself God. We believe in the Trinity. These are things that are fundamental to us, things that Muslims despise and think are heretical. So there is a lot of interesting questions here. This is not a book that condemns Islamists. No, not by a long way. This is a book that answers questions for Christians. And I would suggest to you that it's very even-handed. This is not a hate-filled book. I'll tell you what, if this was a hate-filled book, it would be out my window now, because I don't entertain things like that. But this is a very worthwhile insight. I can't believe that most Christians could read this without learning an awful lot about Islam. But what is taught within the context of Christianity. And the questions that you will face and the supplementary questions for study groups, which are at the end of each chapter, again 4 or 5 questions usually, are very helpful. And every chapter has a summary ending, which is common for all these books. And the summary is very, very clear. In fact, I would say to you, this is a book that you can just consult, because you can go to the right question, look up the summary, and in 2 minutes, you can cull an awful lot of information from one of these books. So, I'm quite fond of that. The other one that I picked up, I don't know quite what I think about it, really. This is by John Gilhooly, and it's 40 questions about angels, demons, and spiritual warfare. Now, I think it's really good that they've made this book because it lifts this subject into the regular, into the commonplace, into the marketplace, because spiritual warfare is so often ignored. In fact, the spiritual in general is often ignored. Lots of Christians don't want to go there, when in fact the Bible is full of the spiritual, of God himself is spirit, Jesus says. This is really a very important series of questions. And I think that when you go through these and work through these, what you will find is the author seems to me to be being too careful about some issues. I think that he talks about New Age, he talks about tarot, he talks about lots of things that majority of Christians would want to steer clear of. And some of his comments are a little bit unclear to me and sort of leave some room. But I would say to you that this is definitely a book that should be of interest when you're wanting to know about angels, demons, and there are lots of other people you could read on these subjects. But like the other ones in this series, it's very accessible, very readable. And the questions in this vary from world systems model of spiritual warfare, strategic level deliverance model, war of the flesh model. Then there are questions related to particular practices that you'll see in elements of the church, tearing down strongholds, putting on the full armour of God, binding the strong man, spiritual mapping. There's even some talk of practicing exorcisms. So this is an interesting book. I suppose what I'm saying is I wouldn't want to have this as the basis for my understanding of angels, demons and spiritual warfare, but it's definitely a good primer, a good starting place. So what am I saying about 40 questions about as a series? What I'm saying is it's very interesting, and I'm sure you will find something in this series that will help you and direct you. I think the Mark Strauss one is excellent on translations, but I suppose if you see someone on the list of authors that you've read elsewhere and liked, that might be a starting place for you, as Mark Strauss was for me. I think the Islam one definitely has a contribution to make. And with all of these, there will of course be a leaning towards the worldview of the author. And you will see that in books of this standard. And I think you have to take that into account when you read them. So, an interesting new series for me. I only recently discovered it. I think it's already producing an outstanding volume in the Mark Strauss volume. And there are other ones which are definitely worth engaging with. These are quotable books for essays which are so accessible that anybody in your church could engage with them. These are like a tabloid newspaper in the way that they're written. Very, very accessible indeed. But I hope this has helped you. If it has, remember to give us a thumbs up. Make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you clicked on the bell, and you'll know about our next release on Pastor's Library. I hope that has helped you, and I hope I will see you next time on Pastor's Library. Until then, bye!